Imagine the Straw Hat Captain waking not to blue skies and ocean waves, but to the acid-stained heavens of a dying hive world. His lungs burn with chemical smog as he stands among the broken and starving masses, their eyes hollow with despair, their bodies bent by endless toil. In this universe, laughter is heresy, dreams are punishable by death, and freedom is a lie whispered only by the damned. Yet Luffy stands tall, his impossible rubber body healing from wounds that would kill any mortal man, his unfading smile, a beacon in the grim, dark nightmare of the 41st millennium. The planetary governor watches from his spire, imperial forces gathering at his command. They have crushed 1,000 rebellions before, but they have never faced a man who refuses to bow even to gods. In a universe built on fear and sacrifice, can one pirate's unbreakable spirit survive the grinding machinery of the Imperium of man? The void between realities shimmered with unnatural energies. A tear formed in the fabric of space itself, hemorrhaging impossible colours that no mortal eye was meant to witness. Through this wound in causality fell a single battered vessel, its wooden hull somehow intact despite the crushing pressure of the immaterium. The ship spiralled through the darkness, trailing fragments of another universe in its wake. Aboard the vessel, a young man in a straw hat slept peacefully, unaware of the transformation occurring around him, his body contorted and twisted in ways that defied natural law. His rubber limbs stretching and contracting as reality itself attempted to reconcile his existence with the physics of this new universe. The warp touched him, tested him, and found something it could not break. The ship crashed through the upper atmosphere of Hive Tersus, a sprawling industrial world in the segmentum obscurus. Burning fragments of the wooden vessel scattered across the putrid skies, raining down upon the spires and underhives like the tears of an angry god. The largest piece carrying the still unconscious figure plummeted toward the central hive spire, a massive Gothic structure that housed the planetary governor and his court. But fate, or perhaps something more sinister, intervened. The trajectory shifted at the last moment, sending the burning wreckage into the deepest underhive, where the forgotten and the damned scraped out an existence among toxic waste and forgotten technology. The impact shook the foundations of the hive, rattling the teeth of nobles in their spires and crushing the makeshift homes of a dozen families below. When the dust settled, a crowd of hollow-eyed unders gathered around the impact crater. From the wreckage emerged a figure, his clothes torn but his body unmarked by the catastrophic fall. He stood, adjusted a straw hat upon his head, and looked around with wide, curious eyes. "Where am I, and where is my crew?" he asked, his voice carrying an accent never before heard on this world. The gathered crowd stepped back, their emaciated faces masks of fear and confusion. In the Imperium of man, the different was dangerous. The different invited scrutiny, and scrutiny meant death. But the stranger only grinned, his smile impossibly wide, showing teeth too white and too perfect for this world of industrial pollution and malnourishment. "I am Monkey D. Luffy," he announced to the stunned crowd, "and I am going to be the king of the pirates." In the highest spire of Hive Ters, warning runes flashed across ancient coitator screens. Servo skulls buzzed through marble halls, their metallic voices repeating the same message. Anomaly detected. Warp incursion in Underhive Sector 17. Xenos contamination possible. Governor Thaddeus Ironheart rose from his gilded throne, his augmentatic eye whirring as it focused on the holithic display before him. The old man had ruled this hive for nearly 2 centuries, his body sustained by the finest rejuvenate treatments and mechanical augmentations that the Adeptus Mechanicus could provide. His remaining human eye narrowed as he studied the readings. What manner of creature could survive such an impact, he wondered aloud. His chief advisor, a hunched figure in the crimson robes of the Mechanicus, stepped forward, mechadendrites writhing from his back like metal serpents. "The anomaly registers as human, my lord, but the readings are inconsistent. There are traces of warp energy, but not in patterns consistent with known demonic entities." Ironheart's augment hand clenched, hydraulic pistons hissing with the force of his grip. Human or not, anything that emerges from the warp is a threat to Imperial order. Deploy the Arbites. I want this anomaly contained before it can spread its taint. As the command went out, the governor turned to a Vox unit embedded in his throne and sent word to the Astartes vessel in orbit. Tell them we may require their expertise in dealing with a potential warp entity." In the depths of the underhive, Luffy walked through the twisted corridors of rusted metal and crumbling rocket, seemingly oblivious to the filth and desperation around him. Underhivers scattered before him, hiding in shadows and aloves, watching with a mixture of fear and fascination. But one figure did not hide. A young woman, her face marked with the ritual scars of an underhive gang, stepped into his path. Despite her youth, her eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen too much suffering. "You should not be here, stranger," she said, her voice raspy from years of breathing toxic fumes. "The upper hives will have detected your arrival. The Arbits will come, and then we will all suffer." Luffy tilted his head, studying her with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Who are you, Mirror?" she answered, her hand resting on a crude auto-pistol at her hip. "I lead what remains of the Rust Vipers in this sector." "You have food around here?" Luffy asked, his seriousness instantly replaced by a childlike eagerness. "I am starving," Mira blinked, taken aback by the unexpected question. "Food? We barely survive on nutrient paste and recycled corpse starch. There is no food here, not as you might understand it." Luffy's expression fell, a comical disappointment crossing his features. "That is terrible. Where I come from, food is everything. It brings people together. It gives strength." He pounded his chest with a fist. "A person needs meat to be strong." Before Mira could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the underhive corridors. Her face paled. "Arbite's transports. They are coming." She grabbed Luffy's arm, intending to pull him into a hiding place, but found her hand stretching his skin like rubber. She recoiled with a gasp. "What are you?" Luffy grinned again, pulling at his cheek and stretching it to an impossible length. "I am a rubber man. I ate the gum-gum fruit and became rubber." Mira stepped back, making the sign of the Aquila reflexively. "You are warp-touched, mutant. If they find you, they will burn you." "Let them try," Luffy said, his grin never faltering but his eyes hardening with determination. "I have faced many who wanted to burn me or drown me or cut me. I am still here." The rumble grew louder, and now they could hear the clank of armoured boots on metal grating. The Adeptus Arbites, the feared enforcers of Imperial law, were closing in, their heavy footfalls echoing like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast. Mira made a decision. "Come with me now." She led Luffy through a maze of corridors, through holes in walls barely large enough for a human to squeeze through, and finally into a vast chamber that might once have been a manufacturing sector. Now it housed hundreds of their makeshift dwellings constructed from the detritus of the hive. Children with distended bellies and hollow eyes stared at the newcomer. The elderly, their bodies twisted by mutation and malnutrition, whispered prayers to the God Emperor. "This is what remains of our sector," Mera explained. 3 years ago, the manufacturing above us was sealed due to a production shortfall. The food dispensers were shut down. We were left to die, forgotten by the upper hives. Luffy looked around, his normal cheerful demeanour subdued by the suffering he witnessed. "Your leaders did this. They left you to starve." "The Imperium does not care for the weak," Mira said bitterly. "We exist only to serve, to work until we die, so that the nobles in their spires can prosper." Luffy's fists clenched at his sides. "That is wrong," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "A captain takes care of his crew. A leader protects his people." Before Mira could respond, the far wall of the chamber exploded inward. Through the dust and debris marched a squad of Arbites, their carapace armour gleaming in the dim light, their helmeted faces expressionless masks of authority. They carried shotguns and shocks, weapons designed to subdue and punish, rather than kill cleanly. "By the authority of Governor Ironheart and the Holy Adeptus Terra, we are here to apprehend the warp entity designated Anomaly." 17 announced the lead Arbit, his voice amplified by his helmet's voxcaster. "Surrender the mutant and your punishment will be merciful." The underhivers cowered, pressing themselves against the walls, mothers clutching children to their breasts. But Mira stepped forward, placing herself between the Arbites and Luffy. "There is no warp entity here," she said defiantly. "Only people the Imperium has abandoned to starve in darkness." The lead Arbite raised his shock maul. "Interference with Imperial justice is punishable by death under Hiver. Stand aside." "No," Mira replied, drawing her auto-pistol. A futile gesture against the armoured enforcers, but one born of desperate courage. The Arbite's shock maul descended, crackling with energy that would send thousands of volts through Mira's body, stopping her heart instantly. But the blow never landed. Luffy's arm stretched impossibly, his hand catching the Arbite's wrist in mid. The enforcer stared in shock at the extended limb, his training momentarily forgotten in the face of this impossibility. "I do not like bullies," Luffy said simply. Then his arm retracted with shocking speed, pulling the Arbite off his feet and sending him flying across the chamber to crash into the opposite wall. The remaining Arbites raised their shotguns, but Luffy was already moving. He leapt into the air, his body twisting as he shouted words that made no sense to the Underhivers or the Arbites. Gum gum whip. His extended legs swept across the chamber, knocking the Arbites off their feet. Those few who managed to fire their weapons found their shots passing harmlessly through Luffy's rubber body or bouncing back at them. The Under watched in stunned silence as this strange, laughing young man dismantled the feared enforcers with ease. When the last Arbite fell, Luffy stood amidst the unconscious bodies, not even breathing hard. He turned to the gathered crowd, his smile returning. These guys were not very strong. Mira approached him cautiously, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You defeated an Arbite squad single-handedly. No one does that. It is impossible." Luffy shrugged. "I have done more impossible things before breakfast." He looked around at the watching Under. "These people need food. Where can we find food? The upper hives have food." One of the bolder Underhivers suggested, "The nobles feast while we starve." Luffy nodded as if this were the most natural suggestion in the world. "Then we will go to the upper hives and get food for everyone." Mira grabbed his arm again, feeling the strange rubbery texture of his skin. "You cannot simply walk into the upper hives. They have security, servitors, Morites, and now that you have attacked Imperial authorities, they will label you a heretic. They will kill you." Luffy's smile never wavered. "Many have tried to kill me. I am still here." He looked around at the gathered Unders, his expression growing serious again. "In my world, I am a pirate. Pirates take what they need and live free. You're not free here. These nobles, this emperor, they keep you in chains without using chains." A murmur went through the crowd. What the stranger was saying bordered on heresy. Yet there was a simple truth to his words that resonated in their starving hearts. "I will get food for all of you," Luffy declared, "and then we will make the ones who left you to starve pay for what they have done." In that moment something changed in the underhive of Hive Turs. A spark ignited in the hearts of the downtrodden. A dangerous spark that the Imperium had spent millennia trying to extinguish. It had many names throughout human history: defiance, rebellion, hope. In the highest spire, Governor Ironheart watched the picked feed from the Arbet's helmet cameras with mounting fury. The feed had cut out shortly after the strange rubber man had begun his attack, but he had seen enough. "This is no ordinary mutant," he growled. "Its abilities are too controlled, too powerful." The Mechanicus, adept at his side, made the sign of the cog. "The entity's physiology defies known science, my lord. It appears to possess the ability to stretch its body like some form of elastic material while retaining human strength or greater. Fascinating." Ironheart turned his augmentic eye on the adept. "Your fascination is noted, Margot, but I require solutions, not observations. This creature has assaulted Imperial authorities and is likely rallying the Underhives as we speak. The estate's vessel in orbit has responded to our hail, my lord," announced a communications officer. "They will dispatch a kill team immediately." Ironheart nodded grimly. "Good. In the meantime, seal all access points between the Underhive and the mid-levels. Cut off all nutrient dispensers to the affected sectors. If this rubber man wants to be their saviour, let him try to save them from starvation." Magos's mechandrites twisted anxiously. "My lord, such measures will result in significant civilian casualties. The Underhive population in those sectors numbers in the hundreds of thousands." "They are already lost," Ironheart replied coldly. "Better to excise the infected limb than risk the health of the entire body. The God Emperor will understand the necessity." As night fell upon Hive Turs, or what passed for night in the perpetual gloom of the Underhive, Luffy and Mira gathered with the leaders of various Underhive gangs. Word had spread quickly of the rubber man who had defeated the Arbites, and many came out of curiosity or desperation. "The upper access points are sealed," reported a scarred man with augment eyes, the leader of a scavenger gang known as the Scrappers. "They have cut off the nutrient paste dispensers. In a week, people will start dying." "We cannot wait a week," Mira said grimly. There are children here who are already on the edge of starvation. Luffy, who had been sitting cross-legged on a rusted barrel, stood up. Then we break through the sealed doors. How thick can they be? The gang leaders exchanged glances. The bulkhead doors are solid adamantium, explained the scrapper leader, designed to contain industrial accidents or uprisings. We have tried before with mining charges stolen from the manufacturers. They did not even leave a scratch. Luffy cracked his knuckles. Let me try. I have broken stronger things. The gathered leaders looked skeptical, but none voiced opposition. They had seen the picked captures of the Arbitite's defeat. If this strange visitor could perform one miracle, perhaps he could perform another. They led Luffy to the nearest sealed bulkhead, a massive door of dark metal inscribed with imperial warnings and skull symbols. The bulkhead separated the underhive from the lowest manufacturing levels of the midhive where food might be found. Luffy studied the door, walking around it, tapping it with his knuckles. Then he stepped back, his arms beginning to twist in a way that made the watching under flinch. "Gum rifle!" he shouted, his arm unwinding with devastating force, his fists slamming into the center of the bulkhead door. The impact echoed through the corridor like a cannon shot. The adamantium bulkhead, designed to withstand industrial explosions, dented inward, but it held. Luffy frowned, shaking out his hand. This door is tough, but I have faced tougher. He stepped back further, his body beginning to change in a way that defied understanding. His skin took on a pinkish hue and began to steam, as if his very blood were boiling within him. "Gear second," he announced, and suddenly he moved with blinding speed, appearing before the door in an instant. Gumjet Gatling. His fists became a blur, striking the bulkhead hundreds of times in the span of seconds. Each impact rang like a bell, the sound building to a deafening crescendo as the adamantium began to buckle and tear. With a final devastating punch, the center of the bulkhead gave way, leaving a hole large enough for a person to climb through. Luffy stepped back, the strange transformation fading from his body, leaving him momentarily winded. "That was harder than I expected," he admitted. "This world is strange. I feel like my powers are different here." The underhive stared in shocked silence, then erupted in cheers and shouts. Some fell to their knees, making the sign of the Aquila and whispering prayers. Others simply wept, overcome by the sight of the broken bulkhead and what it represented, a path to salvation. Mira approached Luffy, her eyes wide. "What are you truly?" Luffy grinned, his energy seemingly restored in an instant. "I told you I am Monkey D. Luffy and I am going to be the king of the pirates." With a final devastating blow, Luffy struck the sergeant in the chest, his haki-infused fist punching through the front of the Ceriamite armor. He did not penetrate the flesh beneath, but the impact was enough to overload the remaining systems. The iron hand collapsed, his armor locking into a rigid statue as emergency protocols engaged. Luffy stood amidst the fallen space marines, his body bearing the marks of the intense battle. Cuts from power weapons leaked blood down his arms and torso. Burns from energy discharges mottled his skin. Yet he remained standing, victorious against warriors engineered to be the pinnacle of human capability. He turned to find Mira still there, watching from the shadows, her face a mask of disbelief. "You defeated Astartes," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of something previously thought impossible. "No one defeats the angels of death." Luffy shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. They were strong, very strong, but not unbeatable. He looked around at the warehouse, now a battleground littered with broken bodies and shattered equipment. "Is the food safe? Did your people get what they needed?" Mira nodded. "Yes, enough to feed the underhive for weeks. But this is not over. The Imperium will send more forces. They will never stop until you are dead and we are punished." "Then we need to strike first," Luffy said, his normally cheerful demeanor replaced by the calculating mind of a warrior who had faced impossible odds many times before. "Your governor, the one who ordered your people to starve, where is he?" "The Spire Primus at the very top of the hive," Mira replied, "but it might as well be on another world. No underhiver has ever reached the upper spires and lived to tell of it. The security, the void shields, the private armies of the noble houses. It is impossible." Luffy grinned, blood still staining his teeth. There is that word again. Impossible. He wiped blood from his chin. "I need food and rest. Then we make a plan." In the command center of Spy Primus, Governor Ironheart stared at the tactical display in stunned disbelief. The runes representing the Iron Hand's kill team had all turned from the active green to the dull red of defeat. 5 arties, some of the deadliest warriors in the Imperium, had fallen to a single opponent. "This cannot be," he whispered, his augmentic hand crushing the armrest of his command throne. "Nothing defeats Astartes in direct combat. Nothing human." Magostril's mechondrites writhed with agitation. "The entity is clearly not fully human, my lord. The data from the Iron Hand's armor feeds before they went dark suggests capabilities beyond even the most extreme mutation. Its body appears to possess elastic properties that defy conventional physics, and it displayed strength comparable to an Astartes, perhaps greater." Ironheart's human eye narrowed. "A daemon, then, or some new Xenos threat?" "Inconclusive," the Magos replied. "It registers as biologically human in most scans, yet its capabilities exceed known human potential." Most interesting was the phenomenon observed in the final moments of the battle. The entity appeared to coat its limbs in some form of black substance that enhanced their striking power dramatically. The governor rose from his throne, pacing the command center with nervous energy. "Whatever it is, it has defeated Imperial Arbites and Astartes. The Underhivers rally to it. If this spreads to other sectors, we could have a full-scale rebellion on our hands. The Iron Hand's vessel in orbit has acknowledged the situation," reported a communications officer. "They are preparing a larger force, but estimate deployment time at 6 hours minimum. They advise immediate evacuation of all essential personnel to orbit." Ironheart's face flushed with anger. "I will not abandon my world to a mutant and a rabble of Underhive scum. Activate all remaining battle servitors. Deploy the planetary defense force. I want security doubled around all access points to the Midhive and upper spires." He turned to Magos Dill and prepared the Ordinatus engine. The Magos's human eye widened in shock. "My lord, the Ordinatus has not been sanctified for use in over 3 centuries. Its machine spirit is likely dormant, possibly corrupted, and using such a weapon within the hive structure could cause catastrophic damage to essential systems. Better to rebuild than to lose the hive entirely to rebellion." Ironheart snapped. "The Ordinatus will be our final option if conventional forces fail. Now go awaken the engine. I want it ready to fire within 12 hours. As the Magos hurried away, Ironheart turned back to the tactical display. Runes representing Under's movement showed a spreading pattern of activity radiating outward from the breach point. Already reports were coming in of similar breaches in adjacent sectors. The contagion of rebellion was spreading. "This ends today," he promised the empty air, "one way or another." In the Underhive, Luffy sat cross-legged amidst a crowd of Arak onlookers, devouring a pile of nutrient bars with inhuman speed. Despite their bland taste and pastel-like consistency, he ate as if they were a feast fit for kings. "These are terrible," he announced between mouthfuls, "but food is food, it gives strength." Around him the atmosphere had changed. Where before there had been only despair and resignation, now there was cautious hope. Word had spread quickly of the Rubberman's victories against the Arbits, and even the dreaded Space Marines. Children peeked out from behind their parents to catch a glimpse of the legendary figure. Elders whispered to one another, wondering if the prophecies of the Emperor's return might take an unexpected form. Mira sat beside him, conferring with the leaders of the various Underhive gangs who had assembled in this makeshift war council. A crude map of the hive had been drawn on a sheet of metal, showing the known access routes and security checkpoints. The most direct path to the upper spires would be through the main transit shaft, explained a former Midhive worker who had been cast down to the Underhive for some minor infraction. But it is heavily guarded at every level with automated defense systems that would shred anyone attempting unauthorized access. Another gang leader, a woman whose face was a web of circuit-like tattoos, pointed to another section of the map. The maintenance tunnels offer a less direct route, but with fewer defenses. The problem is navigation. They form a labyrinth that changes as sections are sealed off or rerouted. Without proper augment interfaces, we would be lost within hours. Luffy finished the last of the nutrient bars and wiped his mouth. "What about from the outside?" he asked, pointing to the outer skin of the hive represented on the map. "Can we climb?" The gathered Under stared at him in shock. "The outer skin," one of them repeated incredulously. "It is thousands of meters high, exposed to toxic atmosphere and radiation, and the upper spires are protected by void shields that would incinerate anything approaching from the exterior." Luffy nodded thoughtfully. "Void shields, like energy barriers, more powerful than any energy field you can imagine," Mera explained. They can repel bombardments from orbit. Nothing physical can penetrate them when fully powered. Luffy's eyes lit up. When fully powered, so they have a power source, something that can be damaged or turned off. A silence fell over the gathering as they considered this line of thinking. Finally, the tattooed woman spoke up. The void shield generators are housed in armoured bunkers at the base of each spire. Theoretically, if one could reach them and disable them, the shields would fail, but they are among the most heavily guarded installations in the hive. So, our choices are to fight through the main transit, get lost in maintenance tunnels, or assault one of the most defended positions in your city, Luffy summarized. He grinned suddenly. I like the third option. Fewer innocents in the way. Before the discussion could continue, a commotion arose at the edge of the gathering. A young underhiver, no more than 12 standard years old, pushed his way through the crowd, his eyes wide with urgency. They are coming, he shouted, a massive force. PDF troopers, more skittery, combat servitors, all advancing through the breach points. They will be here within the hour. The gang leaders looked to Mira, and she in turn looked to Luffy. In the span of a day, the command structure of the Underhive had shifted, centering on this strange visitor who had given them something long forgotten. Hope. Luffy stood, his lanky frame somehow imposing despite his lean build. They expect us to stay here to defend this position, he said. But that is not how pirates win battles against larger forces. We do not fight fair. He turned to Mira. Evacuate as many of your people as possible through the tunnels you know are safe. Spread out, hide, survive. Then he addressed the gang leaders. I need a small group of your best fighters. While the main Imperial force is busy searching the Underhive, we will strike at the void shield generators. A diversionary tactic, murmured the tattooed woman approvingly. Bold, suicidal, countered another leader. But what choice do we have? We fight, or we die. As the Underhive dispersed to prepare for evacuation or battle, Mira pulled Luffy aside. You have given these people something dangerous, she said quietly. Something the Imperium spends every effort to stamp out. And what is that? Luffy asked. Choice, she replied simply. The freedom to choose their own fate rather than accept the one assigned to them by the Imperium. That is the greatest heresy of all. Luffy's expression softened. Where I come from, every person has the right to chase their dream, no matter how impossible it seems. Your Emperor, your Imperium, they take all that away from people. That makes them my enemy. And enemies of the Imperium do not live long, Mira warned. Luffy's smile returned bright and confident. I have had many enemies, emperors, gods, the world itself. I am still here. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Now show me the way to these shield generators. It is time to pay your governor a visit. As the Imperial forces descended upon the Underhive in overwhelming numbers, a small group slipped away through maintenance accessways and forgotten tunnels. Luffy, Mira, and a dozen of the most capable fighters from various gangs moved swiftly through the darkness, guided by a patchwork of knowledge from those who had worked in different sections of the Hive. Their destination was the southeastern quadrant of Hive Tertius's base, where the void shield generators for Spy Primus were housed in an armoured bunker. According to their intelligence, it was guarded by a full squad of Qatari, automated defence turrets, and data spirits that would trigger alarms at the slightest unauthorised presence. The outer defences are designed to prevent long-range attacks, explained a former tech adept who had been cast down to the Underhive for tech heresy. They do not expect anyone to reach the entrance on foot through the toxic wastes. Luffy nodded. Then that is our advantage. Surprise. They emerged from a maintenance hatch into the blasted wasteland that surrounded the base of the Hive. The sky above was a sickly yellow-green toxic cloud swirling in unnatural patterns. The ground was a mixture of industrial slag, chemical waste, and the accumulated detritus of millennia of human habitation. The Underhivers immediately pulled filtration masks over their faces, the crude devices offering minimal protection against the poisonous atmosphere. Luffy, however, seemed unaffected, breathing the toxic air as if it were the freshest sea breeze. Another advantage of being rubber, he explained when Mira looked at him. Questioningly, poisons do not affect me as much. They moved quickly across the wasteland, taking cover behind mounds of slag and rusted machinery. Ahead, the void shield generator complex rose like a fortress from the polluted ground. Its architecture a brutal statement of function over form. Massive power cables as thick as a man's torso snaked up the side of the hive spire, carrying energy to the shield emitters thousands of meters above. There, whispered the tech heretic, pointing to a service entrance partially hidden behind a pile of discarded machinery that leads to the maintenance corridors. The main shield controls will be in the central chamber. Luffy studied the entrance, noting the automated turret positioned above it, its barrel moving in a slow sweep of the approach. "I will go first," he said. "When I've dealt with the defences, follow quickly." Before anyone could object, he was moving, his body low and fast across the open ground. The turret detected him instantly, swiving to track this new target. It opened fire, a stream of high-caliber rounds cutting through the toxic air. Luffy's body twisted and stretched, avoiding most of the rounds, absorbing those that struck him with minimal damage. He reached the base of the structure and launched himself upward, his arms stretching to grab the turret's barrel. "Gumhammer!" he cried, using his elastic arm as a pivot point to swing his body around and drive both feet into the turret with crushing force. The weapon crumpled under the impact, sparks flying as its targeting systems failed. Alarms began to wail within the complex. Luffy dropped to the ground before the service entrance and waved urgently to the others. They dashed across the open ground, reaching the entrance just as the inner doors began to close in an automatic security response. Luffy wedged himself in the narrowing gap, his rubber body stretching and compressing as the adamantium doors pressed against him. With a grunt of effort, he forced them open wide enough for the others to slip through. Once they were inside, he allowed himself to be pushed out, the doors slamming shut with enough force to dent normal steel. For a moment, they had lost their champion. Then the doors buckled inward as tremendous force was applied from the outside. With a screech of tortured metal, they gave way, Luffy stepping through the opening he had created. "Which way?" he asked, seemingly unfazed by the exertion. The tech heretic pointed down a corridor bathed in the red glow of emergency lumens. "Central chamber is that way, but they will have activated internal defences by now." As if in response to his words, the floor beneath them split open, panels sliding apart to reveal automated gun servitors rising on hydraulic lifts. Simultaneously, gas began to hiss from vents in the ceiling, a green mist that caused the Underhive Vivers' eyes to water even through their filtration masks. "Toxic nerve agent," gasped the tech heretic. "Fatal within seconds of exposure." Luffy took a deep breath, expanding his chest to an impossible size, then exhaled with hurricane force, blowing the gas back into the vents. "Run," he shouted to the others. "I will deal with the guns." As the Underhive sprinted down the corridor, Luffy engaged the gun servitors. These were not the lumbering combat machines he had faced before, but stationary weapons platforms with multiple rotating barrels designed for close-quarters defense. They opened fire as one, filling the corridor with a deadly crossfire of high-velocity rounds. Luffy's body became a blur of motion, dodging some shots, allowing others to strike his rubber flesh and rebound. He closed with the nearest servitor, his hacky blackened fist smashing through its armoured housing to tear out its central processing unit. Before the other servitors could adjust their aim, he was among them, a whirlwind of destructive force that left shattered machinery in of his wake. Further down the corridor, the Underhive encountered a squad of Kitari defenders, their radium carbines already raised and firing. 2 of the gang fighters fell immediately, their bodies glowing with deadly radiation as the rounds found their mark. The others took cover behind structural columns, returning fire with stolen autopistols and shotguns, their crude weapons barely scratching the cyborg warrior's armor. Mira crouched behind a fallen piece of machinery, her autopistol clicking empty after a futile barrage against the Kitari. "We cannot break through," she shouted over the den of battle. "There are too many." Suddenly Luffy was beside her, moving with that uncanny speed that seemed impossible for his lanky frame. "Stay down," he advised. Then he launched himself into the midst of the Skitari, his body spinning like a top. Gum Gum Tempest. His extended limbs became a blur, striking the cyborg warriors from multiple angles simultaneously. Mechanical parts flew as augment limbs were torn from bodies. Optical sensors shattered under the barrage of blows. In seconds, the corridor was clear. Thekitari reduced to twitching piles of broken machinery and bleeding flesh. The tech heretic stared in awe. "The central chamber is just ahead," he said, pointing to a massive doorway emblazed with the skull and cog symbol of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "But it will be sealed. The access protocols require a tech priest's authorization." Luffy approached the door, studying it briefly. Then he drew back his fist. "I have my own access protocol." The blow struck the center of the doorway with such force that the reinforced metal bent inward like paper. A second blow tore the doors from their hinges entirely, sending them crashing into the chamber beyond. Inside was a vast space dominated by a pulsing reactor core, its blue-white light casting harsh shadows across banks of coitators and control panels. Attendant tech priests froze in the midst of their rituals, their mechondrites rising like threatened serpents. Servitors continued their mindless tasks, oblivious to the intrusion. "Stop the rituals," commanded the lead tech priest, his voice a distorted screech through vox implants. "Protect the sacred machinery." Luffy strode into the chamber, undaunted by the array of technology or the defenders moving to intercept him. "Which one controls the shields?" he asked over his shoulder. The tech heretic pointed to a massive control throne situated on a raised platform overlooking the reactor, the Magister's seat. "It interfaces directly with the shield matrix. Keep the others busy," Luffy said. And then he was moving, leaping over the heads of approaching servitors, stretching his arms to swing from overhead pipes and conduits, making his way toward the control throne. The underhivs engaged the lesser defenders, their stolen weapons proving more effective against the lightly armoured tech acolytes than they had against Thekatari. Mira led them in a coordinated assault, using the chamber's machinery for cover. As they advanced, Luffy reached the control throne, finding it occupied by a senior tech priest. His body more machine than flesh, integrated directly into the throne systems through a forest of cables and mechondrites. "Abomination," hissed the tech priest, his remaining human eye narrowing with hatred. "You corrupt the purity of the Omnissiah's domain with your mutant flesh." Mechanical appendages lashed out from the throne, some ending in manipulators designed for delicate calibration, others tipped with energy cutters or injector needles filled with glowing fluids. Luffy dodged most, but one mechondrite wrapped around his arm, its energy cutter activating with a whine of power. To the tech priest's shock, the blade failed to sever the rubber limb, though it left a smoking gash that caused Luffy to wooz in pain. The pirate's free hand shot out, grabbing the tech priest by his mostly mechanical throat. "How do I turn off the shields?" Luffy demanded. The tech priest's vox emitter produced a sound that might have been laughter. "The void shields are sacred technology, mutant. Their activation rituals are known only to the highest orders of the Mechanicus. You cannot simply turn them off like some primitive power switch." Luffy's eyes hardened. "Then I will do this the direct way." His grip tightened, metal creaking under the pressure. The shield generators. Where are they? The tech priest's human eye darted involuntarily to a series of massive cylindrical structures lining the walls of the chamber, each thrumming with contained energy. "Thank you," Luffy said, releasing the tech priest. He turned to the battle below where the underhivs were gradually being pushed back by reinforcements flooding into the chamber. "Mira, get your people out now." As the underhivs began a fighting retreat toward the exit, Luffy approached the nearest generator. He studied it briefly, then drew back his fist, coating it in the glossy black of his armament. Haki, Gum Gum Red Hawk. His fist ignited with flames as it struck the generator housing, punching through the armoured exterior to the delicate mechanisms within. The generator sputtered, energy discharges arcing from the breach before exploding in a cascade of blue-white lightning. Alarms screamed throughout the facility as Luffy moved to the next generator and the next, systematically destroying each one with devastating blows. The tech priests wailed in mechanical agony as their sacred technology was violated, some attempting to interface directly with the damaged systems in desperate attempts to stabilize them. As the final generator fell, the entire chamber plunged into darkness for a heartbeat, before emergency lumens activated, bathing everything in a blood-red glow. The constant background hum of the void shield, so omnipresent that it had become unnoticed, was suddenly conspicuously absent. "The shield's down," Luffy announced, rejoining Mira and the surviving unders at the chamber entrance. "Now we can reach your governor." Mira stared at him in disbelief. The void shields protected the entire upper spire. Without them, she trailed off, as the implications sank in. "Without them, the governor is vulnerable," Luffy finished for her, "and we have a path straight to him." High above in the command center of Spy Primus, Governor Ironheart stared in horror at the flashing red runes on his tactical display. "The void shields are down," reported a pale-faced officer. "All generators in the southeastern quadrant have been destroyed." Ironheart's augmentatic eye-word as it focused on the display. "Impossible. Those generators are among the most heavily defended installations in the hive." "My lord?" interrupted another officer, his voice quavering. Long-range augs detect movement on the exterior of the hive. Something is climbing the outer skin. Show me, Ironheart demanded. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a magnified image of the hive's exterior wall. A small figure was indeed ascending the vertical surface, moving with impossible speed and agility, arms stretched to impossible lengths, finding handholds where none should exist. The rubber man was scaling the thousands of meters of the hive exterior as easily as a child might climb a tree. "Emperor, protect us," whispered someone in the command center. Ironheart's face contorted with rage. "Activate all exterior defenses, air defense turrets, interceptor servitors, everything. That abomination must not reach the spire." "My lord," Margot's voice came through a Vox unit, "the Ordinatus is prepared for firing." Awaiting your command, the governor hesitated. The Ordinatus was a weapon of last resort, a relic of the dark age of technology, capable of unleashing destruction on a scale that could threaten the structural integrity of the entire hive. To use it against a single target, even one as dangerous as the rubber man, seemed excessive. But the alternative was unthinkable. If the mutant reached the upper spire, if he managed to penetrate the command center itself, target the southeastern face of the hive, Ironheart ordered. "Fire when ready." On the exterior of the hive, Luffy climbed with single-minded determination. The toxic atmosphere bothered him little, his rubber body more resistant to the caustic chemicals than normal human flesh. The vertical climb was challenging even for him, but he had scaled stranger and more dangerous surfaces in his many adventures. He was approximately halfway up the massive structure when the first defenses activated. Weapon emplacements concealed in the hive's skin swiveled to target him, opening fire with everything from solid projectiles to energy beams. Luffy dodged where possible, his body contorting in ways that defied normal human limitations. Those shots he couldn't avoid struck his rubber flesh, stretching it before rebounding with reduced force. Energy weapons left burns but failed to stop his ascent. Then came the interceptor servitors, flying mechanical nightmares that resembled metal insects with rotary cannons and grasping claws. They swarmed around him, attempting to tear him from the hive wall or riddle him with bullets. Luffy met this new threat with the same indomitable will that had carried him through countless battles. His limbs stretched out to swat the servitors from the air or crush their mechanical bodies against the hive wall. For each one that fell, two more seemed to take its place, but still he climbed. His progress slowed but not halted. Inside the hive, Mira and the surviving Unders had fought their way to a maintenance lift that would take them to the upper levels. With the void shields down and security forces focused on the external threat, they found the internal defenses reduced and disorganized. "The governor will be in the command spire," Mira explained as the lift rose through the levels of the hive. "If Luffy can create enough of a distraction from the outside, we might be able to reach him." The tech heretic who had accompanied them shook his head grimly. "You do not understand what you are dealing with. The command spire is a fortress within a fortress. Even with reduced security, we cannot hope to breach it with our numbers." "We do not need to breach it," Mira replied. "We just need to reach the communication array. From there, we can broadcast the truth to the entire hive. Let the people know that the governor left the underhive to starve while hoarding food. Show them that resistance is possible." Outside, Luffy had ascended beyond the range of most of the hive's defenses. The air was thinner here, the toxic elements less concentrated, but the radiation more intense. He could see the upper spire now, a gleaming needle of adamantium and ceramite that pierced the polluted clouds. Then he felt it. A vibrate weapon of incredible size, its barrel longer than some Imperial spacecraft, mounted on a tracked chassis that crushed everything in its path as it rumbled into position. The Ordinatus. Even at this distance, Luffy could feel the power building within the ancient weapon, a deep thrum that resonated through the very structure of the hive. He had no doubt that if that weapon fired, nothing in its path would survive, including himself. He had to reach the spire before it could fire. With renewed urgency, Luffy increased his pace, pushing his rubber body to its limits. His arms stretched further with each grip. His legs propelled him upward with greater force. The remaining interceptor servitors fell behind, unable to match his sudden burst of speed. In the command center, Governor Ironheart watched the rubber man's progress with mounting panic. "Why has the Ordinators not fired?" he demanded. "Final targeting solutions are being calculated, my lord," replied an officer. "The machine spirit requires proper appeasement before it will release its power." "We do not have time for ritual," Ironheart shouted. "That thing will reach us before your precious machine spirit is satisfied." As if in response to his words, the main view screen showed the rubber man making a final impossible leap, stretching his arms to their absolute limit to grab the very edge of the command spire's landing platform. With a heave of superhuman strength, Luffy pulled himself up and over the railing, standing now on the platform outside the armoured doors that led to the command centre itself. "Seal all entrances," ordered Ironheart. "Deploy the Taurian servitors." Massive bulkhead doors slammed shut throughout the spire. Hidden panels in the walls of the landing platform slid open, disgorging hulking combat servitors twice the size of a normal human. Their bodies a grotesque fusion of flesh and weaponry. These were the governor's personal guard, equipped with the finest weapons and armour that money and influence could procure. Luffy faced the new threat without hesitation. He was tired now, his body showing the cumulative damage of multiple battles and the toxic environment. Burns from energy weapons marked his skin. Cuts from power blades had not fully healed, yet his eyes remained clear and determined. "I have come too far to stop now," he said, his voice carrying across the platform despite the howling wind at this altitude. "Your governor must answer for what he has done to the people below." The Taurian's body underwent a startling transformation. His muscles expanded, taking on a glossy sheen as if inflated from within. Patterns resembling tribal tattoos appeared on his skin, pulsing with inner power. Steam rose from his body as he rose slightly into the air, bouncing as if gravity itself had less hold on him. The servitors opened fire, a barrage of high-caliber rounds and energy blasts converted the space he had occupied milliseconds before. Gumkongan, his fist, now massive and black with haki, shot forward with devastating force. It struck the lead servitor squarely in the chest, the impact crushing its reinforced torso into scrap metal and rupturing the biological components within. The servitor flew backward, crashing into two of its fellows with enough force to damage them as well. The remaining Taurians adjusted their tactics, spreading out to engage the target from multiple angles. But in his boundman fought in husks one by one. Inside the command centre, Governor Ironheart watched the destruction of his elite guard with growing terror. The order that would destroy us as well. "Better to die in service to the Emperor than let that abomination reach us," Ironheart snarled. "Give the order." At the base of the hive, the massive Ordinator's weapon finally completed its activation rituals, its barrel elevated, aligning with the coordinates provided by the command centre. Energy built within its ancient core, a power that could level mountains now focused on a single point of the hive structure. In the maintenance shafts of the upper spire, Mira and her band of underhivs had reached the communication array. The tech heretic worked feverishly at the controls, bypassing security protocols and authorization requirements. "I have access," he announced finally. "We can broadcast to the entire hive, perhaps even to neighbouring hives and orbital facilities." Mira stepped forward, her face resolute. "People of Hive Ters," she began, "I speak to you from the shadows into which you cast us. For too long the governor and the nobles have feasted while we starve. They have hoarded food that could feed thousands, leaving children to die in the underhive." As she spoke, her voice echoed through public address systems throughout the hive, in manufacturums and hab blocks, in market squares and noble houses. The people of Hive Tertius paused to listen to this unprecedented interruption. But today something changed. Mira continued. "A stranger came among us, one who showed us that even the most powerful can be defeated. The Arbites fell before him. The dreaded Space Marines could not stop him. Even now he fights to reach the governor himself to hold him accountable for his crimes against the people." On the command spire's landing platform, Luffy had defeated the last of the Taurian servitors. His gear fourth form was fading, the rubber limbs deflating back to their normal size. The tribe